Commander Zethkar flexed his four muscular arms as he studied the holographic display floating before him. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the bridge lights of the Cathara dreadnought Bone Crusher. For 3,000 cycles, his species had dominated this sector of the galaxy, and for good reason. The Cathara were apex predators from Mortis Prime, a world where the very air could kill most species, and where survival meant constant battle against everything from acid rain to carnivorous plants that could dissolve metal. "Commander," hissed his second-in-command, Vexthon, her mandibles clicking nervously. "The scouting probe has returned from the Sol system. The readings are unusual." Zethkar's compound eyes focused on the data streaming across his neural interface. The third planet from the system's star showed clear signs of life, but the atmospheric composition made him pause. 21% oxygen, high nitrogen content, liquid water covering most of the surface. His exoskeleton shuddered involuntarily. "This cannot be accurate," he growled, his voice box producing the characteristic bone-rattling sound of his species. "No advanced civilization could possibly evolve in such a hostile environment. The oxygen levels alone would be toxic to most life forms." Vexthon manipulated the hologram with her clawed appendages, zooming in on various continental masses. "The electromagnetic signatures suggest widespread technology use, Commander. Cities, transportation networks, even primitive spacecraft in orbit around their world." Zethkar stood to his full 8-foot height, his predatory instincts sharpening. In all their conquests across 17 star systems, the Cathara had never encountered another species capable of surviving on a true death world. Most civilizations they'd discovered had evolved on garden worlds with gentle climates, low radiation, and minimal natural hazards. These soft species had been easy to subjugate or eliminate. "Show me the biological scans," he commanded. The hologram shifted to display various life forms detected on the planet's surface. Zethkar's 4 hearts nearly stopped beating. Massive creatures roamed the oceans, some larger than Cathara battle cruisers. Apex predators with razor-sharp teeth dominated both land and sea. The plant life itself seemed designed to kill, with some specimens showing clear carnivorous adaptations. But most disturbing of all were the beings the probe had identified as the dominant intelligent species. Bipedal, relatively small in stature with no visible natural weapons or armor. Yet the electromagnetic signatures indicated they had somehow not only survived but thrived in this hellscape of a world. "These humans," Vexthon read from the probe's data. "They appear to lack any significant physical adaptations for their environment. No exoskeleton, no natural weapons, no apparent resistance to their world's toxins." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what passed for a laugh among his kind. "Impossible. They must be a slave species serving the true masters of this world. No creature so physically weak could dominate a death world." The bridge's communication array suddenly crackled to life. "Commander," reported the sensor technician, "we're receiving a transmission from the Sol system. It's directed specifically at our position." Every warrior on the bridge turned to stare. The probe had been designed with the most advanced stealth technology available to the Cathara military. It should have been completely undetectable to any primitive civilization. "Play the transmission," Zethkar ordered, his confidence beginning to waver. The holographic display shifted to show the image of a human male. The creature appeared young by most species standards, with short-cropped hair and wearing some form of military uniform. When it spoke, the universal translator worked overtime to convert the alien language. "Greetings, visitors from Mortis Prime. My name is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We detected your probe approximately 6 hours ago and have been monitoring your vessel since you entered our system. We understand you may be conducting reconnaissance for potential contact or conquest. We invite you to establish formal communications." Zethkar's exoskeleton went rigid. Not only had these humans detected their supposedly invisible probe, but they had somehow identified the origin of his ship and knew details about his species that should have been impossible to obtain. "How?" Vexthon whispered, her voice barely audible above the bridge's ambient sounds. The human admiral continued speaking. "We've taken the liberty of studying your ship's composition and energy signatures. We're impressed by your technology, particularly your adaptive armor systems. We believe we may have much to learn from each other." The transmission ended, leaving the Kithara bridge in stunned silence. Zethkar's tactical mind raced through possibilities. Either this was an elaborate deception by some unknown superior species using humans as pawns, or these seemingly frail creatures possessed capabilities that defied everything the Kithara understood about evolutionary biology. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving another signal. This one appears to be a data packet containing star charts, cultural information, and military specifications." Zethkar almost laughed at the absurdity. "They're voluntarily sharing their military capabilities with us?" As the data flowed through their systems, his amusement quickly turned to bewilderment. The humans' weapons technology was primitive by Kithara standards, relying heavily on chemical explosives and kinetic projectiles rather than the plasma weapons and molecular disruptors his people had perfected. Their ships were slow, clumsy constructions of metal and ceramics rather than the living biomechanical hybrids the Kithara preferred. Yet the more he studied the data, the more unsettling patterns emerged. Human military doctrine emphasized adaptability above all else. Their training regimens were designed around the assumption that soldiers would need to fight in environments that would kill most other species. Their strategic thinking incorporated variables that no sane military commander would ever need to consider. "Look at this," Vexthon said, highlighting a section of the cultural data. "They have competitions where individuals voluntarily expose themselves to extreme physical stress for entertainment. They call them extreme sports. The hologram showed humans throwing themselves from great heights with only fabric wings, racing through treacherous terrain at high speeds, and engaging in hand-to-hand combat for recreation. Zethkar's species had rituals of strength and dominance, but these were nothing like the apparent human tendency to seek out danger for its own sake." "Commander," his tactical officer interrupted, "long-range sensors are detecting movement in the asteroid belt. Multiple objects, moving at high velocity toward our position." Zethkar's four hands flew across his control surfaces. "Battle stations! Raise shields and prepare to engage!" But as the objects approached, they resolved into a formation of small human spacecraft. Unlike the clumsy industrial vessels they had observed around Earth, these ships moved with predatory grace, their pilots demonstrating flight capabilities that pushed the limits of what organic beings should be able to endure. "Sir," his sensor technician reported with barely concealed fear, "the G-forces those pilots are experiencing should have killed them several times over. Our instruments detect no artificial gravity compensation, no inertial dampening systems. They're somehow surviving acceleration that would turn our finest warriors into paste." The lead human ship opened a communication channel. The pilot appeared to be the same species as the Admiral, but this one was clearly older and bore numerous scars across his visible skin. When he spoke, there was something in his voice that made Zethkar's predatory instincts scream warnings. "Kithara vessel, this is Colonel Marcus Reed, commander of the Luna Defense Squadron. We've come to escort you to a diplomatic meeting if you're interested. Fair warning, though, we've positioned some insurance around your ship. Nothing personal, just standard precaution when dealing with unknown military forces." Zethkar's sensors swept the surrounding space and detected nothing. Then his computer began highlighting dozens of nearly invisible objects that had somehow positioned themselves around his dreadnought without triggering a single alarm. The stealth technology was beyond anything in the Kythera arsenal. "How long have they been there?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. They're using some form of energy absorption rather than deflection. Our scans are reading them as empty space." The human colonel continued. "We know you come from a tough world, Commander. We respect that. Earth's a tough neighborhood, too, and we've learned a few things about surviving in places that want to kill you. Why don't we share stories?" For the first time in his military career, Zethkar found himself considering retreat. His species had built their empire on the assumption that their Deathworld origins made them naturally superior to all other forms of life. The Kythera were the ultimate survivors, the apex predators of the galaxy. But these humans had not only survived their own Deathworld, they had thrived on it to such an extent that they treated extreme danger as entertainment. They had developed technology specifically designed around the assumption that any environment they encountered might be actively hostile. Most disturbing of all, they seemed genuinely curious about the Kythera rather than intimidated. "Sir," Vexthon said quietly, "perhaps we should accept their invitation. Our intelligence on these humans is clearly insufficient." Zethkar studied the tactical display one more time. His ship was surrounded by vessels that had somehow appeared from nowhere, piloted by beings who shrugged off G-forces that would kill Kythera elite warriors. The humans had detected their stealth probe with apparent ease and had voluntarily shared information about their capabilities while simultaneously demonstrating that they possessed far more advanced technology than they had initially revealed. "Colonel Reed," he said into the communication array, "the Kythera accept your invitation. We are curious to learn more about your species." The human's scarred face split into what Zethkar would later learn was called a smile. "Outstanding. Follow us to the meeting point. Try to keep up." As the human ships began moving, Zethkar realized they had been holding back during their approach. The acceleration they now displayed was beyond anything he had thought possible for organic pilots. His own ship, despite its advanced biomechanical technology, struggled to match their pace. For 3,000 cycles, the Kythera had believed they were alone in the galaxy as a Deathworld species. The idea that there might be others had never seriously been considered. The possibility that there might be others who had evolved to be even more adaptable, even more resilient, even more dangerous, was not something Kythera psychology was equipped to handle. But as he watched the human ships dance through space with impossible grace, Zethkar began to suspect that his species' understanding of the galaxy was about to change dramatically. The humans had called Earth a tough neighborhood, but they had said it with the casual confidence of apex predators discussing their territory. The Kythera were about to discover what it meant to meet beings who considered a Deathworld to be home, sweet home. The meeting station hung in space like a crystalline flower, its transparent walls offering a panoramic view of the star field beyond. Zethkar found himself oddly unsettled by the structure's apparent fragility. Kythera architecture emphasized strength, with thick biometal walls and redundant protective systems. This human construction looked as though a stray asteroid could shatter it. "Atmospheric composition is suitable for both species," reported his aide as they prepared to disembark, "though the oxygen content is dangerously high for extended exposure." Zethkar nodded grimly. The humans had somehow created an environment that accommodated Kythera physiology while remaining breathable for themselves. Either they possessed remarkably advanced atmospheric engineering, or they were simply accustomed to making do with whatever conditions presented themselves. The airlock cycled, and Zethkar stepped into the station's central chamber. Admiral Chen was waiting for him, along with several other humans who appeared to represent different aspects of their civilization. What immediately struck him was their apparent calmness. Every other species the Kythera had encountered showed clear signs of stress when meeting them for the first time, The sight of an 8-foot-tall chitinous predator with 4 arms and compound eyes typically triggered fight-or-flight responses. These humans simply looked interested. "Commander Zethkar," Admiral Chen said, extending her hand in what their cultural briefing had identified as a gesture of peaceful greeting. "Welcome aboard the Harmony Station. We're honored to be the first to establish formal contact between our species." Zethkar carefully extended one of his smaller manipulation arms to accept the gesture. The Admiral's grip was firm without being aggressive, and he noted the calluses that suggested regular physical labor despite her obvious rank. Most civilized species pampered their leadership classes. "The honor is ours, Admiral," he replied, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true anymore. "We are curious to learn more about your remarkable civilization." Chen gestured toward a conference area where human and Kithara furnishings had been arranged in a rough circle. "Please, make yourself comfortable. Can we offer you refreshment? We've prepared several options based on your physiological requirements." As they settled into position, Zethkar studied the other humans present. Dr. Elizabeth Warren appeared to be their chief scientist, an elderly woman whose eyes held the sharp intelligence he recognized in veteran warriors. Director James Morrison represented their diplomatic corps, though something in his bearing suggested military training. Most intriguing was Captain Maria Santos, who wore the insignia of their space forces, but carried herself with the loose readiness of a born fighter. "Before we begin formal discussions," Admiral Chen said, "we thought you might be interested in learning about Earth's history. It might help explain some of the characteristics your probe recorded." The chamber's holographic systems activated, displaying a 3-dimensional map of Earth's continents. Zethkar settled back to listen, though part of his mind remained focused on analyzing potential threats and escape routes. Dr. Warren took over the presentation. "Earth's development has been shaped by catastrophic events on a scale that most worlds never experience. In the past 500 million years, we've endured at least 5 mass extinction events: asteroid impacts, volcanic supereruptions, ice ages that lasted millions of years, and dramatic shifts in atmospheric composition." The hologram showed continental drift, massive volcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts that would have sterilized most worlds. Zethkar's compound eyes tracked the data with growing amazement. Mortis Prime was dangerous, but it was consistently dangerous. These humans had evolved on a world that regularly tried to murder everything living on it. Each extinction event eliminated roughly 70 to 90% of all life on the planet, Dr. Warren continued. The survivors were inevitably the most adaptable species, those capable of thriving in multiple environments and adjusting rapidly to changing conditions. Captain Santos leaned forward. "Our ancestors survived ice ages by learning to use tools and cooperate in ways that amplified individual capabilities. When the climate warmed, they adapted again. When other predators threatened them, they became better predators. When diseases swept across continents, they developed medicine and hygiene practices that let them survive what should have been extinction-level plagues." Zethkar's tactical mind began processing the implications. "You are saying that your entire evolutionary line has been repeatedly tested by global catastrophes." "Exactly," Admiral Chen confirmed. "And not just tested, but forged by them. The humans you see today are the descendants of beings who survived multiple apocalypses. Our psychology, our social structures, our technology, all of it has been shaped by the assumption that comfortable conditions are temporary and that survival requires constant adaptation." Director Morrison activated another section of the hologram, showing human historical development. "When we developed agriculture, we had to deal with droughts, floods, and crop diseases that regularly devastated entire civilizations. When we built cities, earthquakes, hurricanes, and volcanic eruptions forced us to rebuild repeatedly. When we developed industry, We had to account for environmental changes that our own activities created. Zethkar studied images of human settlements in environments that would challenge even Kythera engineers, cities built on earthquake faults, communities thriving in desert regions that received almost no rainfall, populations living on volcanic slopes that regularly erupted with devastating force. "Why do you not simply relocate to safer areas?" he asked. Captain Santos laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both warm and slightly predatory. "Because there are no safe areas, Commander. Every region of Earth has its own natural hazards: hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, floods, droughts, earthquakes, volcanic activity, extreme temperature variations. We learned early that there's no point in running from danger because danger is everywhere." Dr. Warren manipulated the hologram to show global weather patterns. "Our planet's climate systems are inherently unstable. What your species would consider extreme weather events, we call Tuesday. A storm system that could devastate most civilized worlds is something we track on routine weather reports." Zethkar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. "You live with constant environmental threats as a matter of routine." "More than that," Admiral Chen said. "We've learned to thrive because of them. Environmental pressure drives innovation. Constant change prevents stagnation. The knowledge that comfortable conditions won't last forever motivates us to keep improving our capabilities." The hologram shifted to show human technological development. Unlike the steady, logical progression the Kythera had followed, human advancement appeared chaotic, with periods of rapid innovation followed by devastating setbacks, only to surge forward again along entirely different paths. Each time a civilization collapsed due to natural disasters, the survivors incorporated those lessons into their rebuilding efforts, Director Morrison explained. "We developed redundant systems, mobile technologies, and social structures capable of rapid reorganization. We learned to see catastrophe as an opportunity for improvement, rather than just a threat to survive." Captain Santos stood and moved to a section of the station's transparent wall. "Take our space program. Most species develop spaceflight as a natural extension of their technological advancement. Humans developed it because we recognized that our planet regularly tries to kill everything on it, and we needed an escape route." Zethkar joined her at the viewport, looking out at the small fleet of human vessels maintaining position around the station. "Your spacecraft are designed for evacuation scenarios?" "Among other things," she confirmed. "But more importantly, they're designed by engineers who grew up assuming that any system might need to function in hostile conditions with minimal maintenance and no external support. Our ships aren't just transportation, they're survival shelters that happen to be capable of interstellar flight." Dr. Warren called their attention back to the holographic display, which now showed human military history. "Our warfare evolved under the same pressures as everything else. We didn't have the luxury of developing specialized weapons for specific environments. Our military doctrine assumes that soldiers might need to fight anywhere, under any conditions, possibly while dealing with natural disasters at the same time. The images showed human conflicts fought in every conceivable environment: battles in frozen wastelands, jungle warfare in regions that would kill most species through disease and environmental hazards alone, combat operations conducted during hurricanes and earthquakes." "You fight wars during natural disasters?" Zethkar asked, incredulous. "Sometimes the disasters are the reason for the war," Captain Santos replied matter-of-factly. "Resource conflicts, population displacement, infrastructure collapse. When your world regularly reshuffles the deck, you learn to play whatever hand you're dealt." Admiral Chen gestured toward a section showing human exploration history. "This is perhaps what distinguishes us most from other species we've theorized about. When humans encounter a new environment, our first instinct isn't to ask whether it's safe. It's to ask how we can survive and thrive there. The hologram showed human settlements in Earth's most hostile regions. research stations in Antarctica where the environment was more dangerous than vacuum, communities in desert regions where water had to be extracted from the air, populations living on islands that were regularly devastated by tropical storms who simply rebuilt every time and improved their disaster preparedness. You voluntarily live in places that are actively trying to kill you, Zethkar stated, trying to process this information within his understanding of rational behavior. We've found that hostile environments tend to produce the most innovative communities, Dr. Warren explained. When you have to solve survival problems every day, you develop capabilities that serve you well when you encounter new challenges. Director Morrison highlighted human cultural practices. Even our recreational activities reflect this adaptive mindset. We have sports that simulate combat, exploration activities that involve deliberate exposure to natural hazards, and competitive events that test our ability to survive in hostile conditions with minimal equipment. Zethkar thought about the extreme sports footage he had seen earlier. You engage in dangerous activities for entertainment because your normal environment is already so hostile that additional risk barely registers? Partly, Captain Santos confirmed, but also because we've learned that pushing our limits in controlled situations prepares us for uncontrolled situations. Every human child learns to swim not just because it's useful, but because our planet is mostly covered with water, and we might need that skill to survive. The presentation concluded with current human space exploration efforts. Unlike the systematic, methodical approach the Cathara had taken to interstellar expansion, human exploration appeared almost reckless. They sent small teams to investigate environments that would require massive support operations for most species. Your exploration philosophy appears to be built around the assumption that support systems will fail, Zethkar observed. Because they usually do, Admiral Chen agreed. So we train explorers to succeed anyway. A human exploration team is expected to be self-sufficient, not just for the planned mission duration, but for several times longer than planned, in conditions several times worse than anticipated. Zethkar found himself reassessing everything he thought he understood about galactic civilization. The Cathara had conquered 17 star systems by being more dangerous than anything they encountered. Their success had been built on the assumption that their Deathworld origins gave them insurmountable advantages over Garden World species. But these humans hadn't just evolved on a Deathworld. They had evolved on a world that regularly attempted to commit genocide against everything living on it. And they had not merely survived, but developed a civilization based on the assumption that catastrophic change was normal. "Admiral," he said carefully, "may I ask what you hope to gain from contact with the Cathara?" Chen smiled. And Zethkar was beginning to recognize that expression as something far more complex than simple friendliness. Knowledge, mainly. We're curious about how other species have adapted to hostile environments. Your biomechanical technology is particularly interesting to us. And what do you offer in return? Friendship, if you're interested. Trade opportunities, cultural exchange. Perhaps most importantly, we offer perspective. Perspective? Dr. Warren rejoined the conversation. You've built a successful civilization based on your advantages as apex predators from a dangerous world. But you've limited yourselves to conquest models that assume other species are inherently inferior. We've learned to see environmental challenges as opportunities for growth rather than just obstacles to overcome. Captain Santos added, "Plus, we understand what it's like to be the dangerous species in the neighborhood. Sometimes it gets lonely, being the ones everyone else is afraid of. We thought you might appreciate meeting someone who doesn't automatically assume you're the scariest thing in the room." Zethkar felt something shift in his understanding of the galactic balance of power. For the first time since achieving interstellar flight, the Cathara had encountered a species that wasn't intimidated by them. More than that, they had encountered beings who seemed genuinely interested in them as peers, rather than threats or subjects. "You are not afraid of us," he said, and it wasn't quite a question. Should we be? Admiral Chen asked. You're clearly formidable warriors from a challenging world. But so are we. The main difference seems to be that we're accustomed to fighting environments that fight back, while you've been fighting opponents that can be defeated. The meeting continued for several more hours, but Zethkar's mind kept returning to that simple statement. The Kythera had indeed built their empire by defeating opponents. The humans had built their civilization by adapting to an environment that couldn't be defeated, only survived. When the formal session ended, he found himself looking forward to the cultural exchange programs Admiral Chen had proposed. For the first time in his species' history, the Kythera had encountered equals. The implications would reshape everything they thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. 6 months after first contact, Zethkar stood in the observation deck of the Human Research Station, Endeavor, watching a sight that challenged everything he thought he understood about survival. Below, on the surface of Kepler 442b, a joint human Kythera research team was establishing a colony on what both species had initially classified as an uninhabitable hell world. The planet's surface temperature fluctuated wildly between crushing heat and bone-numbing cold every 14 hours. Toxic storms swept across continents with the regularity of clockwork, carrying corrosive particles that could eat through standard environmental suits in minutes. The atmospheric pressure at sea level was enough to crush most spacecraft, while the mountain regions existed in near-vacuum conditions that would freeze exposed tissue instantly. Day 47 of the exchange program, reported Dr. Sarah Kim, the human xenobiologist assigned to study Kythera adaptation mechanisms. Both teams are performing beyond initial projections. Zethkar manipulated the observation controls with 2 of his arms, while gesturing expressively with the others, a habit he'd developed during his extended interaction with humans. Their tendency toward animated communication had proven surprisingly infectious. I must admit, Dr. Kim, watching your people work continues to challenge my assumptions about biological limitations. Through the viewport, they could see Commander Elena Vasquez leading a human engineering team across terrain that would have killed most galactic species within minutes. The humans wore environmental suits, but their movements remained fluid and confident despite the hostile conditions. More remarkably, they appeared to be enjoying themselves. Elena's team volunteered for this assignment, Dr. Kim noted with obvious pride. When we announced we were looking for volunteers to test joint colonization protocols on an extreme world, we had more applicants than equipment. Zethkar's compound eyes tracked his own people moving across the hellscape below. Warrior engineer Krextall was working alongside human specialist Marcus Webb to construct a geothermal power extraction system that would have been considered impossible by either species working alone. The Kythera biomechanical expertise combined with human improvisational engineering was producing results that exceeded both civilizations' previous achievements. Your people continue to surprise mine, Zethkar admitted. Krextall reported yesterday that Specialist Webb suggested modifications to our bio-armor systems that improved their adaptive capabilities by 30%. Our finest engineers had been working on that problem for decades. Dr. Kim pulled up the technical specifications on her tablet. Marcus spent his childhood in the Australian outback during the climate wars. His family's survival depended on modifying equipment to function in conditions that changed hourly. He approaches engineering problems with the assumption that whatever you build has to work when everything else fails. The observation deck's communication system activated, broadcasting the daily status report from the surface teams. Commander Vasquez's voice came through clearly, despite the electromagnetic interference from the planet's magnetic storms. Endeavor. Control. This is Surface Team Alpha. Structural assembly is proceeding ahead of schedule. The Kythera bio-architectural techniques are adapting to local conditions faster than our models predicted. Recommend extending the trial period and adding a 3rd construction phase. Dr. Kim responded, Acknowledged, Surface Team Alpha. Medical monitoring shows all personnel within acceptable stress parameters. How are you handling the overnight temperature drops? Krextal's translation-processed voice joined the conversation. Human adaptability remains remarkable. When standard heating systems failed during the first thermal cycle, the human team improvised solutions using available materials. They appear to view equipment failures as puzzles to solve rather than catastrophes to survive. Zethkar found himself thinking about the broader implications of what he was witnessing. The joint colonization project had begun as a simple cultural exchange, but it was evolving into something far more significant. Both species were learning that their individual advantages could be combined in ways that transcended what either could achieve alone. "Dr. Kim," he said carefully, "I must confess that this collaboration has forced me to reconsider fundamental assumptions about galactic civilization." She looked up from her monitoring equipment with obvious interest. "How so?" Zethkar gestured toward the planet below. "For 3 millennia, the Kithara have built our expansion on the principle that strength conquers weakness. We identified species less adapted to hostile environments and either subjugated or eliminated them. It was efficient, but not particularly innovative," Dr. Kim observed without judgment. "Precisely. We achieved dominance, but at the cost of stagnation. Our technology, our social structures, our strategic thinking, all of it became focused on maintaining superiority over inferior opponents." He paused, watching the human engineers work with equipment that combined the best of both civilizations' capabilities. "We never considered that different adaptive strategies might be complementary rather than competitive." The communication system activated again, this time with a priority alert. "This is Specialist Webb. We've encountered an unexpected geological formation that's interfering with the geothermal extraction. The mineral composition is unlike anything in our databases." Dr. Kim immediately began pulling up geological surveys, while Zethkar activated his own species' analytical systems. Within moments, both had reached the same conclusion. "That's a crystallized metallic compound that should only form under extreme pressure and temperature conditions," Dr. Kim said. "The entire deposit appears to be naturally occurring room-temperature superconductor material." Zethkar's excitement was palpable. "If we can extract and process that material, it would revolutionize energy distribution systems for both our civilizations." Endeavor. "Control, we're seeing something else down here," Commander Vasquez reported. "The crystal formation is responding to our equipment emissions. It's almost like it's actively channeling energy flows." Krextal added, "The biomechanical systems are registering unprecedented efficiency gains when operating near the crystal deposits. This appears to be a naturally occurring technological resource." Dr. Kim and Zethkar exchanged glances. Both understood the significance of what their teams had discovered. Not only was the joint colonization project succeeding beyond expectations, but it had uncovered resources that neither species would have found working alone. "Commander," Dr. Kim said into the communication system, "we're authorizing extended exploration protocols, map the full extent of the crystal formations, and begin preliminary extraction feasibility studies." After the communication ended, Zethkar found himself contemplating the future implications of human-Kithara cooperation. "Dr. Kim, may I share an observation that might seem presumptuous?" "Of course. Your species' approach to galactic expansion is fundamentally different from ours, and I believe it may be more sustainable in the long term." Dr. Kim raised an eyebrow, a human expression Zethkar had learned to recognize as indicating interest. "In what way?" "The Kithara model has been to identify valuable resources, eliminate or subjugate any species controlling those resources, and exploit them for our benefit. It's effective, but ultimately limited by our own capabilities. Whereas the human approach seems to be about finding ways to work with what's already there," Dr. Kim suggested. "Exactly. You encounter a hostile environment and ask how you can adapt to thrive in it. You meet a dangerous species and ask what you can learn from them. You discover new resources and immediately begin theorizing about cooperative extraction and shared benefits. Zethkar activated another section of the observation controls, showing the broader stellar region around Kepler 442b. In this system alone, our joint teams have identified 17 potentially valuable worlds that would have been impossible for either species to exploit independently. The Kythera lack the adaptability to handle the environmental extremes, while humans lack the biomechanical technology to process the materials efficiently. But together, we can do things neither species could achieve alone, Dr. Kim agreed. It's almost like evolution on a galactic scale. Different survival strategies combining to create new capabilities. The observation deck's main display activated, showing an incoming transmission from Earth. Admiral Chen appeared on screen, along with what appeared to be representatives from several other human governmental and scientific organizations. Commander Zethkar, Dr. Kim, Admiral Chen began. We've been analyzing the preliminary reports from the Joint Colonization Project. The results are remarkable enough that we'd like to propose an expansion of our cooperation agreement. Zethkar straightened to attention. What did you have in mind, Admiral? We've identified 43 star systems within reasonable range that contain worlds suitable for joint colonization projects. Some favor Kythera environmental preferences, others favor human requirements, and several appear to require capabilities from both species. Dr. Kim leaned forward with obvious excitement. Are you proposing a formal alliance? More than that, Admiral Chen replied. We're proposing the establishment of a joint civilization. Humans and Kythera working together to explore and settle regions of space that neither species could handle independently. Zethkar felt his four hearts racing. The implications were staggering. Instead of the Kythera's traditional model of conquest and dominance, they were being offered genuine partnership with equals who brought complementary strengths to the relationship. Admiral, he said carefully, such an arrangement would require fundamental changes to Kythera's social and political structures. We have never before considered permanent alliance with another species. We understand, Admiral Chen acknowledged. This would be uncharted territory for both our civilizations, but the preliminary results suggest that human-Kythera cooperation produces capabilities that exceed what either species has achieved independently. A new voice joined the transmission. Dr. Elizabeth Warren appeared alongside Admiral Chen. We've been running models based on the data from Kepler 442b. Conservative projections suggest that joint human-Kythera colonies could achieve technological and social development rates approximately 3 times faster than either species working alone. Zethkar found himself thinking about the political implications. The Kythera High Command had built their authority on the premise that their species was naturally superior to all others. Accepting humans as equal partners would challenge the fundamental assumptions underlying Kythera society. But the evidence was becoming overwhelming. Human adaptability combined with Kythera biomechanical expertise was producing results that neither species had thought possible. The joint colonization project wasn't just succeeding, it was redefining what successful colonization looked like. Admiral Chen, he said finally, I believe such a proposal would require formal consideration by the Kythera High Command. But I can tell you that my experiences during this exchange program have convinced me that partnership with humanity would benefit both our species enormously. We're prepared to send formal diplomatic missions to Mortis Prime, Admiral Chen offered. We're also willing to host Kythera representatives on Earth, though we understand that might require significant environmental adaptations. Dr. Kim activated her tablet and began pulling up atmospheric data. Actually, we've been working on environmental modification protocols that could make Earth more comfortable for Kythera physiology without making it uninhabitable for humans. The preliminary designs suggest we could create hybrid environments suitable for both species. Zethkar stared at the data streaming across Dr. Kim's tablet. The humans weren't just offering alliance. They were proposing fundamental changes to their own world to accommodate Kythera needs. It was a level of cooperation that went far beyond anything in his species' historical experience. "Dr. Kim," he said slowly, "are you suggesting that humans would voluntarily modify their homeworld to make it suitable for another species?" "We're suggesting that we could create spaces where both species can thrive," she corrected. "Earth has plenty of room, and we've learned that environmental diversity tends to drive innovation. Having Kythera perspectives and capabilities integrated into human society would benefit everyone." Admiral Chen smiled, and Zethkar had learned to recognize that expression as indicating genuine pleasure rather than predatory satisfaction. "Commander, one of the things we've learned from this exchange program is that we have more in common than we initially realized. Both our species have survived by adapting to hostile environments. The main difference is that we've learned to see cooperation as another survival strategy." As the transmission ended, Zethkar found himself looking forward to returning to Mortis Prime with recommendations for the High Command. The traditional Kythera model of expansion through conquest had reached its limits, but partnership with humanity offered possibilities that his species had never imagined. Below on Kepler 442b, human and Kythera teams continued their work, building not just a research station, but a template for a new kind of galactic civilization. One based on the recognition that the universe was hostile enough to kill everyone, and that cooperation might be the ultimate survival strategy. For the first time in his military career, Zethkar found himself excited about the future, rather than simply confident about victory. The Kythera had thought they were the sole Deathworld species in the galaxy, but discovering humanity had taught them something more important. They weren't alone in the universe, and they didn't have to face its dangers alone either.